reality you are living in is not an honest mirror, but a meticulously structured reflection designed so convincingly that it makes you believe it is the only thing that exists. Every sensation, every decision, every limitation you think is yours is in fact the result of an energy pattern programmed by the collective unconscious. Humans are born into a pre-shaped perceptual system where what is called reality is only the visible surface of a vast stream of data operating in the deeper layers of consciousness. You do not see the world, you only see the energy map your mind allows itself to perceive. When a person begins to notice small cracks in this veil, a tremor arises. It is the moment when the feeling that something is wrong seeps into what once seemed normal. Simple questions begin to emerge. Why do coincidences happen with such precision? Why does everything in life seem to follow a script already written? Reality is not a solid block of matter, but a reflective field of the energy of consciousness, like the image on the surface of water shifting with every movement of the wind. Every thought, every emotion, every action sends a signal into the field, and that very field responds in the form of circumstances, people, and events. When you understand this, the concept of randomness collapses completely. Nothing happens naturally. Everything is created from the interference of the frequencies of perception that you carry. The system you call the world can only maintain its stability as long as you continue to believe it is real. That very belief is both the chain and the fuel of the illusion. When you wake up every morning and see the same room, the same body, the same old worries, you unconsciously reaffirm that program through its familiarity. But sometimes just a single moment of silence is enough for the first crack to appear, a fleeting sense that something else is looking back at you from the other side of the mirror. That feeling does not come from imagination, but from the deeper layer of consciousness trying to awaken you from the consensual dream. The reality you are experiencing is not outside of you, it lies within the frequency you are emitting. When the frequency changes, the world changes. When attention shifts, the energetic structure of the surrounding space reshapes itself. This is not philosophy, but the subtle mechanics of existence. Every time you feel stuck, it is not because the world is against you, but because the field is reflecting the old energy pattern you have not yet released. Every attempt to control or force only thickens the illusion, for reality does not operate by will but by frequency. The more you try to hold on, the deeper you wander into the labyrinth of your own reflections. Liberation does not come from destroying the illusion, but from seeing through its structure. When you pause, observe, and sense the energy behind every phenomenon, the illusion begins to fracture. The first light of truth pierces through, not loud, not dramatic, just a profound silence, as if space itself is taking a breath. In that moment, you realize the world has never tried to deceive you, it has only reflected the level of awareness you carry. The illusion does not collapse because it is defeated, but because you have stopped believing in it. Have you ever felt an invisible force pulling you to the right place at the right time to meet exactly the person you needed to meet, even though logic could never explain it? A message arrives. At the very moment you are about to give up, a chance encounter opens an entirely new direction, or a song begins to play at the exact instant your heart needs a signal to keep going. If you have ever experienced such things, then please know that you are not alone. It is not coincidence. It is the invisible code of connection at work, the language through which the field speaks to you. This world is not a collection of random events, but a delicate network where every vibration interferes and responds. When you think of someone, the energy of that thought does not disappear. It moves toward that person, creating a resonance that makes them think of you too. And reality must rearrange itself so that those two frequencies meet. All of it happens in silence, precisely, without plan or effort. You only need to be still enough to perceive the signals radiating around you. Synchronicity is not magic. It is the natural mechanism of consciousness. Each time you come into phase with the field, everything begins to align. Doors open, the right people appear, solutions emerge from where you least expect. That is how the field responds to the frequency you emit. But the problem is, most people never recognize this language because they have been trained to believe only in what can be measured, counted, and explained. When something strange happens, they call it coincidence and move on. Thus, the field keeps communicating while they live in the silence of their own making. In truth, the field always speaks. You have only forgotten how to listen. Do you notice the subtle signs reality sends you every day? The repeating numbers, the images that keep reappearing, the casual words that make you stop and think. Nothing is random. Everything is data encoded in vibration. When you begin to pay attention, you open a direct communication channel between personal consciousness and universal consciousness. That is why some people can sense direction before it arrives. They do not predict the future, they simply read the frequency of the present at a depth most others have not yet reached. The truth is the field is always there, not distant, not mystical. It only takes one moment of true listening to see that everything is in order. If you are here reading these words, it is probably not by chance either. Perhaps the field has arranged for you to receive this message at the exact time you needed it. I want to ask you one thing. Are you ready to look deeply into the connections you once thought were coincidences? Are you ready to observe your life as an energy map, trying to guide you? If the answer is yes, let me know that you are truly here with me. Comment, I am ready, or simply type the number 1 in the comments so I can feel your frequency. That is the only way I will know that this signal has reached someone who truly wants to change, who truly wants to remember the language of the field. Do not underestimate that small action, because in the very moment you declare I am ready, your energy has already begun to shift. The field will record that intention and respond with new signs, sometimes very small but so precise that you cannot deny them. I know, perhaps you have doubted before, perhaps you have feared that your deep perceptions were only imagination. But no, that perception is a signal, and it is what is guiding you home. Consider this the beginning of a dialogue between you and the universe. I am not speaking of something mystical. I only want you to pause and realize that there is a subtle order operating around you, and it has always been waiting for you to notice. You do not have to try to understand. You only need to allow yourself to feel. When you pay attention, the field will respond. When you say, I am ready, the field will open the next door. And when that happens, you will no longer feel like you are searching, because you will understand that all along it was the field that has been trying to find its way back to you. The reality in which humans are living is not controlled by some mystical hand, but by a network of beliefs formed over thousands of years. The silent architects of reality are not individuals or organizations, but the very systems of thought, education, and material worship that humanity has collectively agreed to maintain. They do not need to manipulate you with power. They only need to make you believe that only what can be seen, touched, and measured is real. From the very first moment you enter school, your mind has been programmed to separate the soul from life, turning knowledge into a tool of analysis instead of a channel of connection. Everything mystical is placed in the same drawer as superstition, and every perception beyond logic is taught to be doubted. The world is divided into 2 parts, the seen and the unseen, and you are forced to live in only half of the truth. This kind of training has built invisible walls that prevent human consciousness from accessing the quantum nature of existence. When a child sees a strange light in the sky or senses someone's energy, adults will tell them they are dreaming. But in that moment, a door of perception closes. Thus, humanity grows up with a narrowed vision, seeing the world through a tiny crack they call science. It is not that science is wrong, but that humans have used it as a shackle for the mind. Science was born from the thirst for understanding, but it gradually became a system of verification, accepting only what can be proven in a laboratory, forgetting that the observer himself determines the outcome of the experiment. When you only believe in what can be measured, you have agreed to be separated from the flow of the field, where nothing needs proof to exist. These silent architects operate through a simple mechanism reinforcing the sense of separation. When you believe you are an isolated being in a cold universe, you will always feel lacking and seek outside yourself. At that point, you become the perfect link in the material chain, working, consuming, and forgetting your own creative essence. No force needs to oppress you. They only need to maintain one belief, that you are a victim of circumstance. And that is how they succeed. Because the moment you believe you are weak, reality reflects that very frequency, producing evidence that you truly are powerless. This is the most sophisticated form of control, binding the collective consciousness without the need for chains. Yet the irony is, these silent architects are not outside of you. They exist in every thought you repeat, in every moment you choose fear instead of trust, in every unconscious habit that makes you react instead of create. You are not imprisoned by them. You lock yourself inside the mental model inherited from the old world. It is all built on the assumption that this world is separate from you, that consciousness is only a byproduct of the brain, that you are just a small point in an immense space. But when you observe more deeply, you will see the paradox. That very act of observation changes the result. This is true not only in quantum physics, but also in daily life. When you change the way you see, you change the event. When you stop believing in the victim story, the situations that reinforce it begin to disappear. This is why those who live in fear constantly encounter evidence of fear, while those who live in trust are guided by synchronicity. The field does not distinguish between good and evil. It only responds to the clarity of consciousness. The silent architects understand this law well, and so they only need to nurture one thing: doubt. When humans doubt themselves, they disconnect from their creative source, becoming easy to control and losing the ability to read the signals of the field. The more noise, the less stillness, the less connection. The modern world is therefore full of information but lacking in understanding, full of online connections but lacking real empathy. Meanwhile, ancient civilizations without technology could still hear the whisper of the universe because they lived in natural rhythm, unprogrammed to separate. When you look back, you will see that humanity has built a subtle prison from the very progress it prides itself on. Every system of education, economy, and medicine is built on the belief that humans are beings to be controlled and corrected, rather than entities capable of self-regulation through the frequency of consciousness. The reality you are living in is only the product of that model. It is maintained not through violence, but through silent agreement. Every time you repeat the words, "I cannot," "I am not enough," you feed energy to that structure, and when millions of people believe the same thing, the field must respond in that direction. This is the quantum mechanism of society, where belief becomes the material that constructs reality. Yet within that same mechanism lies the door of liberation, because when just one individual changes their frequency, the entire surrounding structure begins to vibrate. The silent architects cannot maintain the old model if the collective consciousness shifts into a new phase. When you realize that no one controls reality but yourself, all external power loses meaning. Awakening does not come from fighting the system, but from seeing through it. Reality does not need to be destroyed. It only needs to be seen with new eyes. Then the silent architects become the fading shadows of a dream that has fulfilled its purpose, and you step out of the architecture of illusion, returning to your true position, where you are no longer the designed, but the designer. There is a strange truth that modern science has only just begun to touch, that the entire universe is not made of solid matter, but of information, energy, and frequency. Everything you see, touch, and feel is only a manifestation of a deeper informational structure, where each small part contains the entire map of the whole. Scientists call it the holographic universe model, while the ancient masters called it the web of light. Both are speaking of the same thing, that reality does not exist outside of you, but unfolds within you, like an infinite mirror, reflecting every possibility waiting to be activated. In truth, you have never been separated from the universe. You are simply observing yourself from another angle of the same hologram. At the deeper level of the field, there is no inside or outside, no me and you, only an infinite ocean of consciousness where every small movement creates ripples that spread through the whole. You may have felt this before without being able to name it. That sudden feeling when you notice a coincidence too precise to ignore, when a thought in your mind is spoken by someone else, or when you dream of something and it happens in real life. All these phenomena are expressions of the holographic field remembering itself through you. There is no randomness, only reflection. When you change frequency, the entire image in the hologram changes accordingly. It is not the world that shifts, but the energy you emit that causes the field to restructure. The real question is not how does the world change, but what frequency are you vibrating at? Because your vibration is the signal that makes the field respond, like light creating an image in a mirror. Are you still there? I want to make sure you are truly listening with your heart, not just your ears. If what I am saying touches something within you, if you feel a subtle pulse resonating in your chest, then let me know with a like. That is not just a small gesture on a screen, but a signal to let me know the energy is truly connecting between us. For a content creator like me, there is no greater reward than seeing true resonance when what I send out is received with genuine emotion. If you can, I am truly grateful for that. Because you are not only supporting me, you are helping expand the frequency of this very field. When you press like, when you pay attention, that attention itself is also a wave and the field registers it. In quantum physics, the act of observation can change the state of a particle. This means that simply by seeing, you have already influenced the result. Reality is not objective as we once thought, but flexible, alive, and responsive to every movement of awareness. This is also true in everyday life. When you focus your attention on gratitude, the field begins to display circumstances that give you more reasons to be grateful. When you focus on fear, the field mirrors back a series of scenarios that make that fear real. The universe does not intend to test you, it is merely replicating the frequency you emit. This holographic field functions as a unified protocol where every unit of energy is instantly connected, even across thousands of light years. Scientists call it quantum entanglement, but ancient civilizations understood this long ago. They knew that every soul is connected to the same web of light, that every thought, every emotion of one person ripples into the field and influences the whole. When you see someone suffering, you are not only witnessing their pain, you are seeing the part of yourself that needs healing. When you help another person move through darkness, you are helping the field restore balance. This is the point where science and spirituality meet, where reason and soul finally nod in agreement that consciousness is the foundation of the universe. The hologram is not merely an image, it is the first language of energy. Light carries information, and that information is encoded by consciousness. When you focus on something, you shine your light upon it, and it instantly becomes real within the field. Therefore, instead of trying to control circumstances, learn to tune the light within, because once you change the way you see, the image in the hologram changes. Reality reflects not through action, but through the frequency of perception. You can test this in your daily life. When you go for a walk, instead of looking at the world through old habits, try to see everything as an extension of yourself. Every person you meet, every breeze that passes by, every glimmer of light on the wall, all are telling a story about your inner state. When you are calm, everything becomes harmonious. When you are chaotic, the world around you distorts. This is not philosophy, it is the principle of holographic coherence. The whole always reflects the part. Every part always carries the code of the whole. When you love, the whole shines. When you fear, the whole contracts. You may call it the law of energy, but in truth, it is how the field maintains its own balance. The modern world has made us forget this language because it cannot be measured by machines. But you do not need any tool to sense something real. You only need to pause, breathe, and realize that everything is breathing with you. When you understand the mechanism of the holographic field, you begin to live differently. You no longer react to reality as a victim, but interact with it as an artist. You paint with intention, you create with emotion, you guide the flow through presence. Reality is not something to resist, but a material for co-creation. And when you truly understand this, everything becomes simple. You no longer ask how to change the world, but how to tune your own frequency. Because when you change, the whole changes. When you shine, the darkness disappears. When you become transparent, the field sees itself through you. And that is the secret of the holographic field, where there is no longer any distance between the observer and the observed, only one stream of light endlessly exploring itself through the countless forms it creates. Reality does not speak in words, it communicates through frequency and symbol. Everything around you, from the numbers on a license plate to the random words of a stranger, are codes that the field uses to respond to you. When awareness becomes still enough, you begin to hear this language, not through the ears, not through thought, but through a deeper form of sensing where you no longer separate events from meaning. In the quantum space, there is no distance between intention and response. Every signal you emit, even a fleeting thought, is recorded in the field and reflected back through specific signs in your life. Repeating number sequences like 111, 222, or 333 are not coincidences but resonant frequencies. When a sequence appears repeatedly, it is when the field is reminding you to look back at your current state. Each number carries its own rhythm of energy, its own data, its own symbol of the information stream being opened. Like music, the field vibrates according to the melody you are creating through emotion. Every emotion has a color, a rhythm, a wavelength. When you live in worry, that melody becomes distorted and fragmented. When you live in trust, that melody becomes smooth, bright, and the corresponding events begin to appear. That is how the field responds. You may not hear words, but you can see the chain reactions of the physical world around you answering through the very frequency you emit. The people you meet, the opportunities that appear, even unexpected incidents, all carry messages. Every event is a line of information, not good, not bad, just feedback. When you understand this, you stop asking, why this is happening to me, and instead begin to ask, what is the field trying to teach me? The language of the field is never wrong. The only question is whether you are still enough to read it. In ancient wisdom traditions, symbols were not seen as superstition, but as means of communication with universal consciousness. Every animal, every image, every dream carries information about the frequency of the observer. When you see the same symbol appear repeatedly, it is when an energy is being activated within you. The butterfly may be a signal of rebirth. The hawk may be a reminder of vision. But the important thing is that there is no fixed meaning for everyone, because the field always speaks in the personal language of each soul. A symbol only holds meaning when it touches you, when it makes you pause and feel something. In that moment, the field is communicating directly, without intermediaries. Reading this language is not about decoding, but about feeling. When you try too hard to assign meaning, you fall back into the level of intellect where everything becomes blurred. But when you listen with presence, you begin to see subtle connections appearing naturally, as if reality itself is translating its symbols for you. The field does not speak in English or Vietnamese, but in images, numbers, rhythm, coincidence, and sensation. This language is soft like water, yet precise like mathematics. It operates under the law of resonance, meaning only what vibrates at the same frequency can meet. A fearful thought will attract a chain of compatible events, while a state of trust will generate synchronicity filled with grace. You do not need to pray with words, because every thought you have is already a prayer sent to the field. What you call life is simply the result of a continuous dialogue between inner energy and the universe's response. No one is punishing you. There is no power that rewards or punishes. There is only the mechanism of resonance, precise to every detail. When you judge, the field reflects situations where you are judged. When you are grateful, the field multiplies the reasons for you to remain grateful. Reality is a mirror that cannot lie. It does not understand words. It only understands frequency. Therefore, if you say you want peace but still tremble inside, the field does not hear the words. It only feels the true vibration. It will bring you different situations so that you can learn to feel safe even when things outside are unstable. That is how it teaches you to grow. When you understand this language, you begin to see that everything that happens has a precise reason, even the things that seem meaningless. A cancelled appointment, a delayed flight, a stranger's smile, all are data. If you are awake enough, you can read the stream of information flowing beneath the surface. Then life is no longer random, but becomes a living dialogue. You no longer beg the universe to answer, because you see it speaking every second. In that state, synchronicity becomes your native language. You move with the flow without needing control, because everything is self-balancing. The language of the field is precision within silence, meaning hidden within the most ordinary things. Each time you inhale and exhale, you are already part of that dialogue. The field never stops speaking, only you stop listening. When you return, still, seeking nothing, expecting nothing, you begin to hear its rhythm, like the heartbeat of the universe syncing with your own. In that moment, you understand that every symbol, every sign, every synchronicity does not come to guide you somewhere, but to remind you that you have never been lost. The language of the field does not lead you to a destination, it leads you home, where you no longer need signs because you have become the very frequency of connection itself. Every change in life does not begin with action, but with the frequency of awareness. When you change your energetic state, everything else begins to rearrange accordingly. The field does not respond to prayer, effort, or planning. It only responds to the purity of the frequency you emit. And that is why there are people who, by simply appearing, make the space around them become quieter, lighter, brighter. Not because they do anything special, but because they are emitting a different field of awareness, a frequency that has been finely tuned. This shift does not come from learning something new, but from releasing the layers of interference that distort your original signal. Every time you fear, doubt, or judge yourself, you distort your own wave. When you trust, feel gratitude, and accept, the frequency becomes transparent, and reality immediately adjusts. The universe does not have a concept of time in the linear sense. So when your energy changes, the response comes almost instantly. The only delay lies in your level of stability. If you oscillate between fear and trust, the field receives a chaotic signal and reflects it back through unclear results. But when your frequency reaches coherence, reality has no choice but to align. This is why there are moments when life seems to change overnight, not because of a miracle, but because the synchronization between awareness and the field has finally been established. In physics, resonance occurs when two oscillating systems share the same frequency. They begin to exchange energy without loss. In consciousness, it is the same. When you reach the frequency of resonance with the state you want to experience, its energy begins to flow toward you. You do not pull it in, you simply become compatible with it. Like radio waves, the signal never disappears, you just have not tuned to the right channel. The reality you desire already exists within the field, waiting for you to synchronize so it can become tangible. Frequency is not an abstract concept, it is the measurable form of emotion. Every emotion has its own wavelength, amplitude, and intensity. When you are in fear, the body emits a chaotic electromagnetic field, the heart beats fast, the breath is shallow, the thoughts fragmented. When you are in trust or gratitude, the heartbeat becomes steady, the breath deep, and the brain waves fall into the alpha or theta state where energy flows naturally. This is not superstition, but the biological mechanism of synchronization between heart, brain, and field. When the three move in the same rhythm, you leave the frequency of survival and enter the frequency of creation. In the frequency of survival, every response is reaction. You try, you resist, you seek control. In the frequency of creation, you do not need to do, you only need to be. When you are fully present, not fearing the past, not predicting the future, the field begins to organize itself around you in higher order. This is when synchronicity happens. The right people and opportunities appear at the right time, and you feel as though everything is gently sliding into place. That is the sign of a frequency shift. Nothing outside truly changes. It is only that you have changed the way you vibrate. The world merely reflects your clarity. But this process requires courage, because it forces you to leave the comfort zone of old energy. The old may be familiar pain, the belief of not being enough, or the story you repeat every day. To step into a new frequency, you must be willing to let the old frequencies collapse. Sometimes this appears as losing something, a job, a relationship, a plan, even an identity you once identified with. But do not mistake that collapse for failure. It is merely the process of energy decompression, where what no longer fits is returned to the field. Nothing is truly lost. There is only phase transition. Each time you let go, you create space for new energy to enter. Letting go is not a passive act, but the courage to accept not controlling anymore. When you stop trying to control everything, you open the channel for the field to self-correct. The field is never wrong. It always seeks to rebalance what you have misaligned. When you stop interfering, the field restores its natural order, and that is when life begins to flow in the right direction. This is the difference between living by will and living by frequency. Will is effort, frequency is state. Will depends on the strength of the individual, frequency depends on harmony with the whole. When you understand this, you stop seeking control and instead learn to tune the inner self. You do not need to fight reality. You only need to raise your frequency one octave higher, and the entire reality shifts with it. When you reach a higher frequency, the things that once worried you lose their influence. You are no longer drawn into old scripts because that energy no longer resonates with you. People, circumstances, challenges all begin to leave your energetic space. This is not avoidance, but because you no longer generate the waves needed to sustain them. This is how the field naturally purifies. When your energy becomes transparent, you enter a layer of reality where everything unfolds more smoothly. Effort disappears, replaced by a sense of flow. You act less but achieve more, because each action is now guided by frequency, no longer driven by reaction. Those who live in this state share one trait. They are quiet, yet powerful. They do not speak much, but when they are present, the space changes. You feel peace simply by being near them, and that is the living proof of the frequency shift. The frequency shift is not a goal to reach, but the natural progression of consciousness when it stops resisting itself. When you stop trying to become someone else, you return to your original state where your frequency and the field become one. In that moment, you no longer observe reality, you are reality. There is no boundary between the creator and the created, only the coexistence of energy in its purest state. And that is the beginning of every true miracle, where each thought becomes form, each emotion becomes a wave, and each breath becomes a message from the universe to you. When your frequency is stabilized in awareness, synchronicity is no longer something you seek, it becomes the way you live. You no longer wait for signs to appear to confirm that you are on the right path, because your very presence is the proof. Everything begins to operate through you as if the field is using your own energy to communicate with the world. Every word, every action, every glance you give carries the frequency of awakening. When others meet you, they do not just meet a person, they meet the reflective aspect of their own energy, and in that moment something within them is activated. That is when you become a living sign, evidence that awakening is not a mystical destination, but a state that can be embodied in daily life. Everything begins to synchronize around you because you are no longer separate from it. Every step, every word, every decision moves in rhythm with the field. When you think of someone, they reach out. When you need help, the door opens. When you walk in silence, the world seems to make space for you to pass through. Not because you are being favored, but because you no longer create resistance. Everything naturally moves toward you, like water finding its way to the lowest point, because you have become the place of non-resistance. In this state, you realize that synchronicity is not an external sign, but the inner breath of the universe flowing through you. Every experience is a dialogue, every event is a reflection, every dream is guidance. You no longer ask whether the universe hears you, because you feel the field breathing with you in every moment. When you speak, the field answers with wind, with light, with the timely appearance of what you need. This language no longer needs translation. You understand it directly through feeling. All limits of time, distance, and outcome dissolve because you have synchronized with the uninterrupted stream of information. In this state, life becomes simple, not because it is easy, but because you no longer struggle against it. Control disappears, replaced by a deep trust that everything is happening for a precise reason. You no longer try to create synchronicity, because you understand that the very desire for it separates you from it. When you stop seeking, the field begins to reflect your stillness through perfect arrangement. Everything comes not too soon, not too late, but exactly when you are present enough to receive. This is the level of awareness where action and non-action unite. You do not sit still waiting, but you also no longer chase outcomes.